What if I told you that the man who should have been Nigeria's president wasn't just betrayed by the military dictator who annulled his election victory, but by his own friends, political allies, and even some of the very people who had urged him to fight for his mandate? Today, we're diving deep into one of Nigeria's most painful political mysteries. June 12, 1993, the day democracy died in Nigeria. MKO Abiola won the freest and fairest election in the country's history, only to watch it slip away through a web of betrayals that went far beyond General Babangida's infamous annulment. I'm talking about betrayals from within his own circle, from supposed allies who whispered sweet promises in public but made dark deals in private. This is the inside story they don't want you to know. Picture this: you've just won the presidency of Africa's most populous nation. The people have spoken. International observers have validated your victory. You're ready to lead 100 million Nigerians into a new era of democracy and prosperity, but then, one by one, the people you trusted most begin to turn their backs on you. Your political associates start making excuses. Your business partners suddenly become unreachable. Even some who publicly support you are secretly negotiating with your enemies behind closed doors. This wasn't just about military dictatorship versus democracy. This was about power, money, ethnic politics. And the deadly game of Nigerian elite betrayal. Let's start with the obvious betrayer, General Ibrahim Babangida himself. But here's what most people don't know: Babangida didn't just wake up one morning and decide to annul the election. He was encouraged, supported, and even pressured by powerful civilian politicians who feared an Abiola presidency. Think about it: Babangida had promised to hand over power. He had overseen the transition program for years. Why would he suddenly change his mind unless he had powerful allies whispering in his ear that Abiola was too dangerous to be president? The truth is, Babangida was getting phone calls from prominent politicians, business leaders, and even international actors who were concerned about what an Abiola presidency would mean for their interests. Some of these were people Abiola considered friends, but the real betrayal started even before the annulment. During the campaign itself, Abiola's running mate, Babagana Kingibe, was already being courted by the military establishment. Sources close to the situation reveal that Kingibe had meetings with military leaders where the possibility of him becoming president instead of Abiola was discussed. When Babangida finally stepped aside and Ernest Shonkan became interim head of state, guess who was appointed foreign minister? Babagana Kingibe. The same man who should have been fighting tooth and nail for his running mate's mandate was instead accepting positions in the very government that had stolen their victory. Now here's where it gets really painful. Abiola, despite being from the southwest, had built his political career by cultivating relationships with the northern political establishment. He had been a financier of northern politicians for decades. He spoke Hausa fluently, had business interests across the north, and had married wives from northern Nigeria, but when it mattered most, when he needed the northern establishment to stand with him, they vanished like smoke. Take the Kaduna Mafia, that powerful group of northern intellectuals and politicians who had dominated Nigerian politics since independence. These were people who had benefited from Abiola's generosity for years. He had funded their campaigns, supported their businesses, and even helped some of their children get scholarships abroad. But after June 12, they remained conspicuously silent. No statements of support. No mobilization of northern masses. No pressure on the military to respect the people's mandate. Why? Because they couldn't stomach the idea of a Yoruba Muslim becoming president, even one who had been more loyal to the north than to his own southwest. General Shehu Musa Yar'Adua, who many considered a Democrat and who had been close to Abiola, maintained an uncomfortable silence throughout the crisis. Adamu Siroma, another northern elder statesman who had worked with Abiola on the Social Democratic Party platform, suddenly became unavailable when Abiola needed support most. Even more painful was the betrayal by religious leaders. Despite Abiola being a Muslim, many northern Islamic leaders refused to frame the struggle as one of justice and fairness. They allowed ethnic considerations to override religious solidarity, but perhaps the most heartbreaking betrayal came from Abiola's own southwest. You would think that the Yoruba political elite would have rallied massively behind their son who had won the presidency fair and square. But the reality was far more complex and painful. many Southwest politicians were conflicted about Abiola. He wasn't their typical candidate. He had been seen as too close to the North, too willing to work with military governments, too much of an establishment figure. Some felt he had abandoned Yoruba interests in pursuit of national acceptance, when the crisis began, instead of massive solidarity. What Abiola got was calculated political positioning. Some Southwest leaders were secretly hoping that if Abiola failed, they could emerge as the next Yoruba presidential candidate. Chief Bola Ige, the intellectual giant of Yoruba politics, gave only lukewarm support to Abiola's struggle. Chief Abraham Adesanya and other leaders of the National Democratic Coalition, NDC, came in later, but their initial response was slow and measured. Even within his own family and business circle, there were whispers of people protecting their interests rather than fighting for justice. Some of Abiola's business associates quietly distanced themselves to avoid military retaliation against their companies. The Southwest masses supported Abiola, but their leader's response was disappointingly fragmented and self-interested. But the betrayals weren't just domestic. The international community, which had praised the June 12 election as free and fair, quickly developed diplomatic amnesia when it came to supporting Abiola's mandate. Western governments that preached democracy suddenly found excuses to engage with successive military governments rather than insist on Abiola's inauguration. The United States, Britain, and other Western powers issued weak statements but took no concrete action to restore democracy. Even more suspicious were reports that some international business interests actually preferred military rule because it was easier to negotiate deals with dictators than with a democratically elected president who might insist on transparency and competitive bidding. Some multinational corporations that had benefited from Abiola's largesse when he was useful to them suddenly became invisible when he needed international pressure to claim his mandate. So who betrayed MKO Abiola? The answer is, almost everyone who should have stood with him. Babangida annulled the election, but he had encouragement from civilian politicians who feared Abiola's presidency. His running mate accepted positions with the very government that stole their mandate. The northern establishment that had benefited from his generosity for decades abandoned him when ethnic politics trumped personal loyalty. His own Southwest gave him fragmented, lukewarm support when they should have been united behind their son. And the international community chose stability over democracy. MKO Abiola died in detention in 1998, still fighting for a mandate that was rightfully his. His death wasn't just the result of military dictatorship, it was the culmination of betrayals from every direction, by people who chose self-interest over justice, ethnic politics over democracy, and personal survival over moral courage. The real tragedy isn't just that June 12 was annulled, it's that so few people were willing to pay the price to defend it. That's the inside story they don't want you to know. What do you think? Were these betrayals or just political calculations? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from Nigerian political history.